Hi, this is Justin Branham from MasterFiddle.com, and in this lesson we're going to work on incorporating chromaticism, or notes that are not in the key or scale when playing over a major chord. We just had a lesson about using the C major scale and all the things we can derive from that over the C major chord. So this is a continuation of that lesson, but we're going into notes that are not in the key, so chromatic notes. That's what chromatic means. Diatonic means in the key. If you're more advanced, you can jump right into this, but if you haven't done the first lesson on playing over major chords, I would go back to that first because that's going to lay the foundation for what we're working on. Again, this is universal for any key and any instrument, but I have it written out for fiddle, mandolin, and guitar. And I'm going to use the key of C as our sort of universal key to work out of. And I'm going to stay over a C arpeggio in this lesson, just one octave C arpeggio. So it's going to have the notes C, E, G. Anywhere on the instrument is fine to play these. I'm going to stay in this register on the fiddle, which would be comfortable for mandolin and guitar too. So the first thing we're going to talk about is upper and lower neighbor tones, and some of the things we can get from those. So let's start with lower neighbor tones, because those are a little easier to hear and to grab. If we take our C chord, which is C, E, and G, and go a half step below each of those notes, we get a lower neighbor tone that is a half step below each note, as I just said. So for C, we would have B to C, and then for E, we would have D sharp or E flat to E natural. And then for G, we would have F sharp to G. So, kind of sounds cool, just like that. When I play B to C, if we're in the key of C, that's actually diatonic. So it's a neighbor tone that's a half step below, but it's actually not chromatic. So not all of these neighbor tones, and we're going to get into enclosure patterns in a little bit too, are going to be 100% chromatic. They may sort of have the sound of being chromatic because of the half steps, but some of them are actually diatonic. So that's the first thing that we want to utilize, is just that lower neighbor tone that's a half step below each of the chord notes. And let's try that with the static rhythm track over C. This is just a C chord. I'll play that lower neighbor tone. So I can play with that idea, excuse me, as much as I want to, in extending the duration that I hold the lower neighbor tone out for. I can hold that lower neighbor tone out for quite a while and create some tension, and then as soon as I go to the chord tone that's directly above that lower neighbor tone, I'm going to have resolution, and it's going to sound great because I've resolved that pretty much in the best way possible, which is a half step. They're really close together. So the lower upper neighbor tones, and then as we get into enclosure patterns, and I'll explain those later, the whole thing is about the resolution. And so you have something that's fairly tense that gets resolved very effectively, and that's why it works. So anytime you're introducing chromaticism or half steps into your improvisation, the resolution is what makes that work and what brings the dissonance to a resolve, to consonance, and that's what we're looking for. So that was a neighbor tone, a lower neighbor tone, a half step below. Now let's do an upper neighbor tone that's a half step above.